A.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so as I said, I will introduce the session, the topic, and then you can introduce a little bit about yourself, about the book, the context of the book, what made you write this book, and then we, Hassan and Noha and me will discuss or will ask some questions about the notion of leadership, and then we will also answer some questions from the audience. Sounds good?
Absolutely.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another online session. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Frank from New Jersey, the United States. So tonight's topic is leadership. This term is everywhere. This concept of leadership is everywhere. So before we start the session or the workshop, I will let Dr. Frank do a little introduction about his background, a few sentences about the context of the book, and then we will move. Hassan will ask some questions, and Noha also will make some comments. Tonight's session is moderated by Hassan 𝗙𝗶𝗍 from Agadir and Noha Hatim from Egypt. So welcome Hassan, Noha, and Dr. Frank.
Thank you, Aziz.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours, Frank. So a little introduction about yourself.
Okay, well, I've been an educator most of my life at this point, and one of the things that always attracted me was the concept of leadership. But as I grew older into my role as a teacher at the high school level, became a principal at the middle school level, now teach at the university level. So I have all the different levels covered. And what I saw in a lot of instances is that people associate leadership with a title. So unless they possess that title, they think that they don't possess that leadership quality. So here, if everyone can just put their hands together like this and feel, just get a grip with your two hands. Now, if you look at your hands, you either have your right thumb or your left thumb on top. Now reverse the order of your fingers so that the opposite thumb is now on top. Feels very uncomfortable, doesn't it? Well, once you get to that zone where you're uncomfortable, that's where you can start seeing your potential. I used to tell every person that walked through that building that they need to accept their role as a leader, because if they don't, then our capacity as a school will always be underserved. Sure, I may have a title, you may have a title, another person may have a title, but if we all work together, we can change the face of leadership. Now, of course, there is going to be a change of command. Think of it like this, like a triangle. So that's a chain of command, but most of the people are at the bottom of that triangle. So if you turn that triangle upside down and give everyone an opportunity to bring ideas to the leadership table, then our ability to achieve grows exponentially. So I wrote a couple of different books, but they all stemmed from my observation of the people around me. For instance, why not start training students at a very early age to allow them to understand what leadership is? And once you do that, then their capacity for change becomes limitless. For instance, if you want to get as many ideas as possible to change something in your school or your building or any organization, how are you going to do it? If you're limited to the number of people that you bring, then your ideas are very limited. So let's say we have strengths and weaknesses around this table that we're at right now. I know what my weaknesses are, but you may not yet know what my weaknesses are. So your strengths will eliminate my weaknesses. So together, that's how we achieve, by taking a look at what we're really strong at and what we're really weak at, and filling in the gaps for each other. So when I started to write this book, Fired Up Leadership, actually the concepts I started about 20 years ago, excuse me, but during the pandemic is when I started talking to people around the world about the need for more leadership, or better put, is probably a different type of leadership than we're used to. A perfect example is serving leadership versus self-serving leadership. Now, look at any religion around the world. It doesn't matter what the religion is, but if you take a religion and you read the scripture of that religion, then what you're going to see is that before you can lead, you must first serve. So in my building as an educator, we would do service projects. For instance, our kids like to surf. If you could see, can you see these surfboards? If you can see them in back of me, they like to surf and skateboard, normal things that students would like to do. So we would use that platform to serve the community. For instance, we would skateboard through town and collect new pairs of socks. So they would come to me and say, "Hey, Dr. O, I got an idea. If we teach you how to skateboard," now, if you look at me, I don't look like a skateboarder, but if a group of students, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, come to me and say, "If you try this, this is what we'll try," then that is leadership. That is something they understand. So to shorten up that story, we were able to collect 2,500 pairs of new socks for homeless people because I tried something I never tried before. So now they're willing. When I say they, the students, the other educators in the building, the custodians, everybody that works in that building becomes important because they are important. So when I decided to, take some of these concepts that I was using with students and my colleagues for 20 years and divide them into different domains. And I'll send this chart out later on Twitter.
Yes,
So
before we talk about the 5 domains in your book and more details, let me intervene a little bit. And what is the simplest version or definition of a leader? What is a leader according to you, or according? I was talking with Hassan earlier about the difference between Moroccan and American context. What is a leader in your context, guys? For example, if you see somebody doing something, is it take a responsibility? Is it risk taking? Is it, what is a leader in your definition?
do you want me to go first?
Yes, of course. And then we can.
Well, you see, leadership isn't a position. Leadership isn't popularity. Leadership is a choice. Unconditional love is a lot like unconditional leadership. Without love, there is no leadership. I do an exercise with my students every year, and I get them to write down one word that is synonymous to leadership for them. And then if you look at all the words that they write down, I usually use something like a ball, or it depends on the season. Every word on that ball that they write down can be also used for love. So without love, there is no leadership. And unconditional love is a lot like unconditional leadership. Once we put conditions on certain things, it doesn't mean that there aren't, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and these are the consequences for not accomplishing it. But every day is a new day. And when your teammates realize that, then they can substitute many different words for leadership. For instance, I have one of my leadership words is strength, and I have 8 core words that I use. Another one is passion. Another one is integrity. Another one is kindness. Another one is character. So there are all of these words that you develop as you develop your personal mission statement, which I'll talk about in the first domain.
Yes, Hussein, you want to say something about this?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Dr. Frank. Actually, what I hear you saying is that you are for a vision of leadership that promotes collective leadership, if we may call it like that. Yes. And that is bottom up rather than top down vision of leadership, where you start by knowing yourself, by as you said, promoting love as unconditional love and serving before leading. And these are all, of course, brilliant ideas. And what I want to ask you about, starting from the title of your book, Fired Up Leadership, and I really like the expression fired up. And just to link this to what some of the audience, our audience and teachers, especially in the Moroccan context, might be thinking about is, of course, there are so many teachers who are already doing this, but if we want this to happen at a larger scale in our schools or in our communities, what is, I would say, is there a recipe for teachers to start becoming leaders? As you know, in the current circumstances, of course, teachers are overwhelmed with the challenges of the pandemic and with the curriculum, lots of expectations from the parents, from the ministries of education, from the curriculum itself, which they have to deal with. So if we are talking about leadership, that's something we can do. How can teachers start becoming leaders from tomorrow? Is it an individual responsibility? Are you saying that every individual teacher should start to become a leader right now? Or is there a mechanism that should happen in the school led by the principals or the teacher trainers that should happen in order to promote leadership? Because some of the teachers would say, well, this is idealistic. I work under very difficult circumstances. I cannot do what you are talking about. Who can help me? So what I'm trying to say is, what about the responsibility of the outside environment, of the teacher trainers, of the principals, of the educational policy makers? So if teachers want to become leaders, do you think that something like that can happen, like a mechanism that is generated by an outside, by outsiders? Is there anything you would recommend?
You asked me a lot of different questions. Very good questions. Very good questions.
Yeah. Okay.
But there is a lot there, and you just have my mind spinning because it all goes back to the beginning.
I was trying to give many questions just to give you some food for thought.
Yeah. Oh,
and you can pick up with
a lot of food. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go hungry. That's for sure. Let's start with ourselves. That's the very beginning of leadership, is that any change that you want to make has to start with you. And that fire, see here's the fire right here, is that passion part, that heart part, the biggest muscle in your body. And if you're not taking care of yourself, then you cannot take care of anyone else, whether it's at your home or your school or in the virtual world. It's not going to be successful in the long term, maybe in the short term, but not in the long term. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at success in the long term, because especially what we just have gone through over the last 18 months, and that is there's no new normal. It doesn't exist anymore. It's sometimes what we create or what has been created for us. So now let's say you're taking care of yourself, and that means in all of your domains, body, mind, heart, and spirit. So if you're exercising, but you're not reading, then you're out of balance. If you're not following, now spirit is different for all of us. It could be found in religion, in a mosque, in a church, in a synagogue, or it could be meditating at the beach. So that's different for everyone. The heart part is to do something that you really enjoy. For instance, you come home when you actually physically went somewhere or you virtually went somewhere, it still takes a lot out of your body, mind, heart, spirit. Now, if you're not doing something that you really enjoy, other than that, then again, you're not creating that balance.
So you are saying that it has to start from the individual, right? We need to take care of ourselves, and then we cannot be leaders if we don't take care of ourselves first. And isn't this a sort of leadership training you are talking about? Don't teachers need some training in this domain?
Yes.
Because we cannot take it for granted that everyone will just start being like that.
Yeah, and I can give you a few helpful tips to get that started. Now, I'm going to fast forward to another thing that I heard you ask, is that people also within their building or within their organizations need to be empowered, because some people are self-serving, then they try to take all the power. And if it's not their idea, or if it's not, they don't get credit for it, then they don't want it, which destroys. It's very toxic to individuals and the organization, and to the children and to the students, which is the worst thing that you can do. So that's why, by creating this environment, and even if you do work in a place that is toxic and you can't get out of there for monetary reasons, you can still take care of yourself. So that's why you start with yourself, and then you find like-minded people, hopefully, in your organization.
Very good. So Dr. Frank, I mean, one of the issues that I faced in my experience as a teacher, as a supervisor, I worked with teachers a lot, and I also in the Moroccan Association of Teachers of English. I don't know if you heard about it, MATE. It's a popular association in North Africa. It's an English teachers association. We work a lot with teachers at the national level. And what I noticed is that you have teachers who are already leaders, who are learning to become leaders, but you also have so many teachers who just are happy with how they are. They don't want to become leaders. They are just, they're consumers. They are happy with that. So how can we increase the volume of leadership in our communities? How can we make sure that we have more and more leaders in schools and in our communities?
Well, if people are taking care of themselves and you allow them to have a voice, I think that was a big component of the culture when I was a principal, is that we allowed other people to have a voice. For instance, if you're trying to solve a scheduling problem, but you're not involving the people who are directly affected by the schedule, then it's not going. It may not get the. It might not get the voice. It might not get the results that you want. We used to bring students in. We used to bring teachers in. We used to bring everybody, parents in, anybody that was connected, and any stakeholder is I guess how you would put it. And if you have a group of teachers, they have a brilliant mind. Right? There's a reason why you became a teacher, and for me, it was my calling. And hopefully for most other people that I've spoken to, it's the same thing. It's their calling, their vocation as well. So there's nothing better in your vocation, in your calling, than having a voice. So ask, hey, you don't have to be the loudest. You don't have to be the guy on top of the chair or the woman on top of the chair, but you can be that person that brings the ideas to fruition, the people that look at the leadership table, and everybody needs to have that voice. So some people, as you say, don't want to have maybe that responsibility, but you can have a voice without having that responsibility, without having that title. So, and once they see that work, once they see that, you know what, people are listening to me, it clicks.
They become part of the leadership, right?
Yes.
So they become part of the leadership,
Yes.
even if they are not, they are not the ones who are, as you say, who are speaking or who are
Yes.
in the positions. So.
Yes.
So I know that leadership is a soft skill, right?
For the most part, but also sometimes you have to chip in. For instance, when there were some jobs when I had that title, but I was doing other things. If I need to wipe off a cafeteria table, if I need to shovel snow, if I need to do something else, you don't mind chipping in. But yeah, for the most part, it's a soft skill. Yes.
Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about, I will give you some leadership skills, and you can tell us which one resonates with you more, or you can make a sort of priority list. So we have risk-taking, we have positivity, we have active listening, we have patience. Now we repeat again: risk-taking, positivity, active listening, patience. Which one of those, if you want to make to prioritize them, which one you put first?
I didn't understand the third one. What was the third one?
Patience.
Vision?
Patience.
Oh, patience.
Yes.
Yes, as a parent, that's one you need as a parent leader, is patience.
Yeah.
You see, this is what I talked about before. I don't know if you can prioritize that list, but there are certain people on your team that are better at each one of those things. For instance, you're going to have to take risks at certain times, but those risks can be very calculated and creative by bringing more ideas to the table. Something like patience is something that you have to keep practicing. You never become an expert or perfect at it, but you need to practice, just like listening and some of the other leadership qualities. You need to keep practicing those. But on some of them, you need your team to jump in, because if they don't, then your success level is going to be minimalized.
So we have questions also about your leadership course that you have for your university students, but we will ask them later about the leadership course. Okay. So the idea of stepping out of your comfort zone. I know that to be a leader, you must change. You must go through a certain process. So you are a different or a better version of yourself. So do you think we should go out of our comfort zone? We should work on ourselves in this area?
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to the question earlier, is some people don't want to do certain things and they associate that with leadership, and it makes them very uncomfortable. So what I use in my university course is I use a number of team building experiences. I'll demonstrate a team building activity, but then I'll require the students to demonstrate a team building activity throughout the semester, so that it may be something they're comfortable with, but another person isn't. And as it rotates through the class, the growth that I see in such simple types of activities are phenomenal. And then you associate those small steps with the bigger steps that they'll take after they leave the course or they leave the university. And it's been very successful. Another thing that we get beyond the comfort zone is when we do serve the community. For instance, we do a lot of work with homelessness, because there are a lot of agencies in our area that we could connect with, and they could help us out. And some people have never talked to a homeless person before because it's uncomfortable. But when we together go do these activities with some homeless people, and they say, you know what, some people are just like me, only they have bad luck. And then there are other people that are homeless that have mental illness attached to it, which is something beyond that we can help them with. So serving the community is another way to push people out of their comfort zones. And we do activities with arts foundations, with people, urban growers that create gardens within the city, Atlantic City. If you've ever heard of Atlantic City, we do a lot of work there. So it creates these opportunities. And then some students in the class have some of these same barriers. For instance, they may have food at school, but they don't have food. It's very difficult for them to feed their entire family. So then we can connect them with certain people where we can help each other and where we can serve the community, and we could go beyond our comfort zone, and we could bring people to different areas to get more comfortable with those activities.
Dr. Frank, if I may ask a question related to what you have just said. Of course, you talked about service learning or serving the community, which is, of course, a very important aspect of leadership. And in Morocco, we have very good examples in our schools of teachers who coach their students to do community service. My question is, because I prefer to echo some of the worries that teachers in Morocco might have. If what tips would you give to teachers to incorporate service learning or community service in a curriculum that is already, filled with language stuff, with so many things they have to teach, and so the problem of time and scope. So are there any tips you would give to busy teachers who already have, a busy schedule and who are not very comfortable with incorporating community service in their units, because sometimes it's not there in the unit? So how can teachers do that, under these circumstances?
There was one thing that we used to do, and we brought it to different schools, was a day of service. For instance, let's say in your English curriculum or your language curriculum, you're doing an essay or a paper, and they would gear for the week leading up to this day of service, they would gear it towards that certain service component that we were targeting.
Okay.
If it was, if we were raising money for food or non-perishable food items or something like that, then the prompt may be the rescue mission there may be a story on a website about a rescue mission. So the teacher would use that as a writing prompt, and then leading up to the day of service, where the whole school would target that particular agency for the day of service. It could be serving food. Another group went and painted their fence. Another group wrote articles for their website. Another group, we were talking about skateboarding. We collected new pairs of socks. So everybody was able to do something in the curriculum that led up to the actual day, or sometimes we did 2 days of service and connected. Another year, sometimes someone in the school was overcoming a barrier. For instance, if you had unfortunately, you may have had a student that was terminally ill, and we would target pediatric cancer support or something like that. But there were ways that we could prompt a curriculum where we could connect math, we could connect language, we could connect physical education, and make it leading up to that day of service. So that is one way that we could take down some of the barriers. And you know what I found out during the pandemic, I think we all did, is that, you know what, we're all busy, and we're never going to be less busy. So if you're waiting for that to happen, that just isn't happening. So sometimes you need to take a step back, take care of yourself, the people around you, before you can step forward.
And the idea of the clubs as well, I think, can also be an option, establishing a club in the school.
Yeah, yeah, sure. If you have that
in parallel with the teaching unit.
Yes, yeah, and then if you have that advantage and you're able to do that within your school, and we had several of them, and I know a lot of schools around our area also are able to do that. And even during the pandemic, we're able to socially distance and get some things done that they needed to get done.
Sure.
So are there any, you talked a little bit earlier about a rotation model you are doing with your students, right?
Could you please say that again?
You talked a little bit about a rotation model, sort of exercise you do with your students, your university student. In the context, a rotation, something I heard the word rotation, maybe.
Yeah. Well, different groups rotate in to do the team building, and when the classes are large, it depends. They've been smaller during the pandemic, but we're back in person for this semester, so the numbers have gotten bigger in person. But we can, when you have bigger classes, one thing to combat the numbers is that I break them into different groups. So if it's a small class, we do it as a class. If it's a bigger class, which I have this semester, then we could use groups so they can pick their own service. They can pick their own service projects, and they also pick their own team building when it's their turn to do their team building. So that's where they rotate in.
Great. And also, maybe I'm not aware of this, but maybe there are certain tasks you do for students to make them leaders, like, for example, clapping their hands, or moving, or putting the tables in certain position, right? So we have to change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're referring to something that I may have posted on Twitter, but I use
I saw the tables, the way you arrange the tables with your students, and maybe I thought this is a way of you to teach them the leadership course, right?
Yeah, well, at least once during the lesson, for instance, I have the class tomorrow morning. Part of the class will be in a circle so that we can all see each other, and it's mask requirements, but we can still distance enough so where our entire class is in a circle so we could see one another. Sometimes the seating in a classroom can be doesn't lend itself for everybody to participate. So that's one of the things that I do during the class. Another thing is I like, at some point we all have to get up and move, because if you're not moving, it doesn't get the blood flowing. And at 8:30 in the morning, a university student, that can be a barrier to success in an early morning class, is the blood not flowing, that oxygen not getting to the brain. But it's similar to younger students needing recess, is that they need that brain dump to be able to move the other parts of their body and let their brains relax for a certain period of time.
One question I have is, I mean, in your experience, training students or coaching students to become leaders, of course, you should have faced some challenges. Can you pick up one or two challenges that you faced while working with students and teachers, or maybe with principals, and how you face those challenges?
Well,
for our audience to learn from you.
Sure. And it's in the beginning, you're going to have certain students already have a label on them, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of implicit bias. For instance, usually associated with maybe skin color or religion or something like that. But there are some students who have a label of he's a bad kid type of a label. So that if you keep telling a student that they are something that they're not, then they develop that trait. So if we switch that to start telling that student the positive things that they are. For instance, I am smart, I am strong, I am beautiful, I am kind, I am loved, rather than he's a discipline problem. It shifts. It shifts how that student sees himself, and it shifts how the people around him see him or herself. And that can make all of the difference in the world. So getting back to leadership training, every year I would have a student sent to me, and a teacher would say, oh, wait until you get Joey. He's such a bad kid. He's going to be in your office. First thing I would do is I would go find Joey, and I would say, hey, Joey, I just heard that you are someone that can help us out with this project or that project. So right away, his perception changes. You know, for the past year, he might have been badgered by people who really didn't take the time to build a relationship with him. Same thing with the teacher, same thing with the custodian, same thing with the parent. Everyone wants what you want. They want to feel like they live a life of importance. And how do you do that? Especially with a young student, is sometimes you have to get them to see not only who they are, but who they can become. And that will make all the difference in the world. I can give you an adult example too. And that's when Barack Obama became president. He was elected president in 2008 in the United States. And I had an African-American gentleman that I worked with, was 72 years old. He had retired from his job as a mechanical engineer and wanted to come back and work in the school. So that's what he did. And he has this magnificent story of vindicating all of his deceased relatives by being able to vote for the first elected African-American president in the United States. And it's a game changer. So imagine if we do that with the younger people. They see
Joey is always the troublemaker.
That's yeah. See, I was the troublemaker when I was younger.
Well, it's very powerful, actually. Yes, trying to change the perception of youngsters, of students. And while you're talking, I also, remember some of the instances, examples of students I had. who suddenly changed when I gave them responsibilities that they appreciated.
Yes.
Of taking care of the wall magazine, for example,
Yes.
you know, asking them to be the photographer for a trip, if you
Perfect.
know they are good at photography. And of course, these are brilliant ideas. And one of the challenges that sometimes teachers face in this, while trying to change the perceptions of students, is the family or the parents. Sometimes you discover that some students really have difficult circumstances at home. And sometimes you're just helpless as a teacher. You cannot, you know, students who face, you know, parents who are divorced or maybe, you know, victims of violence, of alcoholism and things like that. And so sometimes the teacher would also need to become a counselor or even a problem solver outside the classroom boundaries. So don't you think that that's also a challenge when the problem is bigger than what the teacher can do?
And that's why our jobs in schools are so important, because schools for some of those children are safe places. And during the pandemic, they didn't have that safe place any longer for 1/3 of their day. And I always tell educators when I speak to them is that you never know what that person next to you had to go through to get to school. And whether it's your colleague, or whether it's a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old in front of your classroom, you never know. Because I know sometimes how difficult it is for me when I had to get to a job or to a building or to a certain place on time. So that is one component, I think, during the pandemic that we lost tremendously, was that safe haven for some of those students that you just talked about. And teachers too.
Yeah, true.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Nuha has a question or a comment. Nuha, maybe.
Are you there?
Well, I was thinking about when you talked about teaching students how to become leaders. What of the teachers lack that themselves? How can they teach students to become leaders?
Yeah, and that's you know, that's another excellent question. But if sometimes it's through modeling that we teach. If we want the students to portray a certain character trait, and every character trait that you can think of that's a positive character trait can be connected to leadership. So if you one year we were having problems with papers on the floor. A simple problem, but a problem nonetheless. So I asked the teachers to start modeling the behavior of, if you see something on the floor, pick it up. It's not the custodian's job. It's our job. This is our environment. This is our school. And it was met with remarkable results. It was just a simple thing that I would walk up and down the hall. If I see something on the floor, pick it up. And it just something that carried over into the cafeteria, but it was something that made our school better. And it was just a simple thing. And there are bigger things and bigger barriers, but you can also solve these smaller things and these simpler barriers by modeling the behavior that you want to see.
I was saying that this was the first session. We tried to explore the notion of leadership. We also tried to talk to you to discuss your ideas, your perspective, and to brainstorm. This is like a brainstorming session. Do you think we can? Our audience would love to, learn or benefit from the leadership course that you are giving for your students. So, do you think maybe we can have this course program for Moroccan teachers or Moroccan students just to see the idea or the notion. What are the steps that you guys use to make leaders?
Sure. I mean, I don't see why we couldn't. We could do it in a number of different ways. Earlier in the summer, I ran a book study. We could run it as a course. There are a lot of different ideas that we can do. And there are a lot of different things that we can do with free technology that would appeal to different types
Yes,
of learners and leaders.
So
And I
let's
think
talk a little bit about the book. You mentioned 5 domains. Why five domains, not 7 or 8? Or
it's
The rule of the five.
When we used to do, when I first became middle school principal, one of my goals was to create a leadership school. Create a school that when someone walked in, you wouldn't have to tell them, but they would see it. They would see it on the walls. They would see it in the way people spoke to them. They would see it in the children that we put out in our community and the parents that were involved in our school. So we did what we called a leadership exchange. We took a busload of our kids and took them to a school across the county or across the state. And then a couple of months later, those same students from the opposite school would come to our school, and we would exchange ideas, and we would exchange social media, and we would exchange service projects, et cetera, et cetera. So I came up with what we're targeting as leaders, and I came up with 4. But when I was talking about the book to the publisher, he said, Brian Aspinall from Codebreaker said, "You are a passionate human being. So quit fighting it and add that 5th domain, passion, because that's what's driving the other 4 domains. Even though the 4 domains feed off of one another and the jargon goes across the domains, everything is driven by the pump. Everything is driven by the heart. So if you could use an analogy, there are 4 chambers to the heart, right? And
Could you please,
it just so happens that I had 4 domains.
Could you remind our audience of the 5 domains, if possible?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
sure. And I could send out this chart as well. The first domain is self-management organization. Second domain is communication listening. The third domain is critical thinking, problem solving, and team building. And the 4th domain is character, service, and the 5th domain is passion. And I'll put in a little while when we're done, I'll put a chart out on Twitter, and you can see how it looks as a graphic.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, just.
I was just asking if those domains can be used as a basis for a training program, for example, on leadership.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's I used a lot of. I became a student of the game, of the leadership game. I read as many books and contemporary authors as possible. Even reference some authors from 50 or 60 years ago that my wife tuned me into. So it's it absolutely, that's how I organize it in my university class, is according to those domains, and then we get to the 5th domain and get out into the community.
Aziz, you had a question or maybe a comment?
Yes. I know that the discussions is really awesome, and this is a really great topic, and we are learning so many things from Frank and from Hassan and from everyone. So maybe I have one comment about, a lot of people think that that people or some people are born to be great leaders, okay? And others believe that leaders are made, so they go through a certain process, they read a certain training, they have to go through a certain process. But other people think that leaders or great leaders are born to be great leaders. They have these qualities inherent in them, they are born with them. You cannot, for example, you cannot make some people leaders. They are, let's say, they are incompetent, they cannot be leaders, they are followers.
Well, some people are
and they
lazy.
are happy about it.
But let me, I hear what you're saying, and I hear that all the time. And I could show you a couple movies that you can watch that will prove or disprove that theory. But this is what I use an example of one of my former students in a lot of literature that I write. Her name is Julie. And we aren't all born on the same playing field. For instance, some of us are born with more physical attributes and we have bodies that we can work on to become professional athletes. Some of us are born with tremendous resources, money, and we could use those resources to go to the best schools in the world. And then there are some of us, I wasn't born with any of that. But I made choices. And my student, Julie, the first time I met her, she was walking around the corner and she was smaller than the other students. And she walked with an exaggerated limp because she was born with a birth defect. She was born with cerebral palsy. And for her, that meant not only physical challenges, but a learning disability. And at the end of her 7th grade year, she was sitting in the front row of a class that I was teaching, because my goal as a principal was to teach every student in that school and to create a leadership environment. So she writes me a year later that at the end of the 7th grade year, I knew she was moving. Her family moved out of state for work for her father's business. And she had a very painful operation where her Achilles tendons were stretched and screwed into the bottom of the bones on her feet as a 12-year-old. But she said, you know what, Dr. R, I could have been angry at the world. I could have been angry at God. I could have been angry at my parents. But instead, I remembered that you pulled out of your pocket a card. And on that card, you wrote down your goals for the year. And that's something that I'll always remember, because I started to write down my goals. First goal I wanted to put on my shoes and socks. Second goal, I wanted to get that smile back that I always had. I continued to set goals. So I wanted to take an advanced placement English course in high school. So I did. I wanted to follow my passion that I had as a middle school student and become a teacher. So I applied and enrolled in a teacher's college. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy because of my birth defect. I can't drive. But I graduated with a degree in history. And I applied to a graduate school so that I could do my student teaching and become a teacher. And the first day she went in, she told me she was scared. She was the smallest out of 35 high school students, and they weren't nice to her. They threw water bottles at her. They made fun of her. But she just dug deeper and remembered those leadership lessons from middle school. And former student Julie right now is just finished her 2nd year of teaching high school as a history teacher. So the tipping point for her was when she not only saw who she was, but she saw who she could become because we believed in her. And I could tell you stories of teachers that believed in me, and I bet you can tell me stories of teachers that have believed in you as well.
I think that's true. I think it all comes back to the teacher as a model, the teacher as an inspiration for the students. And there's always a light in the students that you can trigger. I think as a reaction to what Aziz said, to what you also said, Dr. Frank, I think the idea of nature and nurture, whether we are born leaders, I think it depends on who you deal with, who you see in your lives. You see people who inspire you, people who show you how you can become better. And I think that's the road to actually to leadership. I don't believe that only the people who are born leaders can be leaders. Of course, inherited characteristics can help a lot. They can help a lot, but people can also learn. They can get inspired, and they can discover their potential, and they can become leaders. I think if we believe in the idea of leadership, not as possessions, as Dr. Frank said, but leadership as a mechanism that happens, that as a collective endeavor where everyone achieves part of the success of all the community. I think you are also reflecting many successes that teachers have had in their classrooms. So being proud of their students who have achieved things thanks to the inspiration from their teachers. Thank you. I believe in that.
Absolutely. And you had asked me at the top of the show, there's no perfect recipe for anything that we do. And there's no perfect recipe for leadership as well, but there are choices and there are possibilities that we all have.
It's true. I had a question. If you don't have a question, I noted down, I wrote down a question that I wanted to ask, which is the global dimension of leadership. If we, of course, in the US, you have this opportunity of having a very diverse populations of students from different cultures and so on. Do you think having students from different cultural backgrounds helps to promote leadership among students, or the opposite? So is intercultural, intercultural competence, does it help leadership, or does it impede leadership?
I think it is absolutely an asset that we need right now, and especially after everything that has gone on in the world over the last 2 years. And I in my university class the other day, I asked the students, how many people in here speak at least 2 languages? And at least half of the class raised their hand. And I said, this is a great class, and we will be able to learn from each other because of the diversity in this class. And that's a strength. So absolutely, it's one that will make your team stronger.
Yeah, I was asking this, Dr. Frank, because years ago, I was reading an article where an author was questioning the concept of leadership as a Western notion, as even as an American notion that is part of the global, colonization or something like that. And I wanted to get your feeling about that, how global it is, and yes, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it needs to be global, and that goes back to seeing somebody that looks like you able to accomplish something that you've always wanted to accomplish, but you were afraid to pursue that because you didn't have any role models that you could relate to. And it absolutely will make us all better by seeing this as a global initiative. It's not just a Western thing, or it can't be just an Eastern thing or a North thing or a South thing. It has to be, we're all on this planet together, and the only race that we are running is the human race. So when we decide that and we see that in each other, then and only then will we be able to reach our capacity.
Yes.
And I actually appreciated how you started your talk when you said that in all religions there is this notion of serving before leading, and I think this is really interesting because there are so many values that cultures in the world share, that religions share. What brings cultures and religions together is more than what divides them, actually. And I think the notion of leadership is an example, because prophets were leaders, and cultural leaders throughout the whole world, they have common characteristics like the ones you mentioned in your five tenets of leadership. I think
yes. Thank you for reinforcing that.
Yes, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. What do you think about that?
I think that's a brilliant quote, and I've I'd like to
it's
say that
not
you made
mine.
that
It's
up,
not.
but I think I've
It's
heard that
not
before.
mine. Oh, it's not mine.
And I think it's brilliant. Yeah, I mean it's a call to action, and well, we could go on. Recently was the 20th anniversary of 9/11 here in the United States, and there was many documentaries and things of that nature. But let me tell you a personal story of relates to that quote. And it was right after 9/11, and I had been a principal for just 2 years at a middle school, and I had a small baby that was less than a month old, and I had another daughter that was 5, and everybody knew where they were. But I heard on the radio, this guy came on and he said, you know, I've decided that I'm going to be a kinder person and buy a stranger a cup of coffee at least once a week. So I go to the same convenience store every day for the 20 years that I was principal in this particular school. And I decided that I was going to do that too, because it was just a simple thing that could make a difference. And the first time I did, I bought a stranger a cup of coffee, and the lady was in shock. She was in shock because somebody that she didn't know was kind to her. And I thought that is so pathetic. That is so pathetic that that's how our world is, that a stranger doesn't know how to accept, doesn't know how to be grateful for something that a stranger did for her. And I started doing it once a week. And it was one time I started a chain reaction. One time I had a student call me and say, hey, I started doing that. And it just, you know, it's a little thing, but it doesn't have to be a cup of coffee, but it can be something that promotes or gets you to act in a kind way. And it's a simple thing. It could be holding a door. It could be saying thank you or please, or you're welcome, calling up somebody you haven't heard from in a long time. And wow, what a difference changer it could be if the world was kinder.
So before we move to some, we will choose some questions from the comments on Facebook. But before we move to that, leadership in itself is a great thing, right?
You know what? It comes in so many different forms, and I think the misconception is that it has to be a position. Yeah, sure, there are leaders.
No, I'm not talking about position. I'm talking about leadership as it's a great thing to be to lead, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But why you decided to add Fire It Up?
You know what? I decided to write it because I want to be that conduit. I want to be that messenger. I want to be that person that lets you look at yourself differently, because I've had models that have allowed me to look at myself differently. And that, for me, in my life, has made all the difference. And I'm a difference maker, and I want other people to be difference makers too, like you guys.
That's great. So let me read the first question. If anyone can become a leader, can you elaborate more on the character domain you mentioned in your book?
On the domains? Is that?
Yeah, the character, you mentioned the character domain, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, maybe explain that to me again.
There is a domain related to character, right?
Oh, yeah. The fourth domain, character service. Yes.
Yes. Briefly speaking, what do you mean by this?
Well, I mean, you have different character traits, and every positive character trait has a opposite negative character trait. So, I mean, I have certain. We didn't get into personal mission statements, which is in domain 1, but I have some core character words that I use, and mine are passion, inspire, integrity, kindness, respect, gratitude, strength, and fun. Now, if we were doing this exercise in domain 1, you would come up with your character traits that you connect with. So that's part of the example, is that every leader that's a positive leader for positive change is going to have positive character traits. And the number one quality of a leader, and I've surveyed over 10,000 people, it's related to some component of character. And that's why it's an important component of the 5 domains of fired up leadership.
Yes, that was really a great session with you, Frank. We really appreciate the time and the effort to spread the love of leadership across the world.
Yeah. Check out Fired Up Leadership.
Of course, we'll share the link to the Fired Up Leadership on the Facebook page, on Everyone Academy page.
Yes.
So before we close the session, I know that we will prepare another session with you, and in another month, we'll include you in one of the webinars.
Sure.
But before we close this session, do you have any final tips or comments for teachers especially in these difficult times, the pandemic, what's going on in the world?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's I decided during this pandemic, and one of the things I did was write a book, because I kept reaching out to people, and people were reaching back to me. So one of my goals is to reach out to people that I haven't heard from, and be prepared that sometimes they don't reach back, but that's okay. So reach out to someone that you haven't heard from. And it could be someone in your family. It could be someone that you used to hang out with. It could be someone that you used to work with, but they will be glad. They will be glad to hear from you. I guarantee you that.
Now, the funny thing, sorry to interrupt. No, the funny thing is that the best friends now are online.
Yeah, and it's I never would have met. Look, I never would have met you guys. All right. Let me ask you a question. How did you reach out to me? How did that happen?
Yes, you are part of my network. So I reached out to you. I saw the idea of leadership, and you are a kind person.
When things open up, I always wanted to come to Morocco. So
yes, of course,
they're out of space for me.
Yes, of course, we will invite you. Actually, we were talking about this idea some time ago, and yes, because of what's going on in the world now, it's a little bit difficult to organize conferences. But if we do so, you are in the first list.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody out there listening tonight. And remember, you're not alone. We are a network strong of educators, and peace and love always wins. So don't forget that.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
So, Alexander, do you have any final comment?
Well, my final comment is to thank Dr. Frank for his time, actually, and I think what I heard are ideas from experience, from real experience, not from pure, academic theory or something like that. This is the, I would say, the outcome of a real experience of a leader who is sharing his ideas and his insights. And I think some of the ideas he said, they already resonate from our experiences.
Yes.
And they reflect our experiences, which is an example of a global leadership, actually. This network, this small network right now is an example of leadership. And I think by joining our efforts, by exchanging our experiences, by meeting in conferences or in webinars like this, we are contributing to leadership, to English language teaching, to educational leadership in general, because it stems from experience, and it's real, and it's human, and it's tried out in reality. So I just want to thank Dr. Frank for this opportunity. And as he said, this should be the beginning. We should continue to collaborate and hopefully to meet.
Yes, of course. We will. By the way, just a quick reminder for the audience: we'll have Frank for another session, another amazing session, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot from him. we'll prepare the session and we'll talk about more details about what we will do in this session, and we will involve more teachers and more people from different perspectives, not just teachers. We can also involve university students, educators from different domains. So thank you so much, Frank,
Welcome.
and
Thank you.
peace and
Very
love,
nice to
as you
see
said.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.